adding game states into our game makes our code significantly more organized. It allows us to work with it and build a more flexible program. So this is something that is going to be a bigger issue than just our little catcher game. Is working with game states allows us to have, or just states in general, allows us to deal with objects besides our game in a more logical way. So we can add it as we start working with multiple objects, multiple types of objects, and animating them or having them have different behaviors within our projects that we work on. We can add states to them so that they can have these different behavioral states. So if something is moving, if something is falling, if something is jumping, if something is exploding, if something is, whatever it may be, we can add in these different states. And when we add it in to our game, then we will refer to it in this case as game states. So I guess this is now V1, so I should change it into V1 because we had V0 before. Working with the game states, there's a couple of different ways that it gets done in different languages. A common way is that there's a programming concept called a constant. It's a variable type that we can set, and it will never, ever, ever, ever change as long as the program runs. So we can set constants for it. Now in this instance, we're not going to do that because the way that processing wants to deal with constants is a little bit different and quirky. So it's kind of internally discouraging us from using constants. So with that, we're not going to go that approach, but it is something that is worth knowing, that we could replace this whole system that we're doing with states and represent these values with constants. In this case, I'm going to use strings as my way of representing it. So I will have a string variable, and I'll call it GameState. And then I will assign values to it. And I'll say my initial game state will be start. Now, in the spirit of using constants, constants are conventionally represented through all capital letters. So I'm going to, even though I'm using a string variable, I will use all capital letters to represent it. So I could even, up at the top here, just make myself a note and say my states. And one state that I have will be start. And then I will have play. And I'll have end. So these are the states that I'm working with in the beginning if I wanted to have more states. And a nice part when you're using constants, if you define all of your states at the beginning, it gives you a real easy place to go and find what values that you will then populate your game state object with as your program progresses. So it's nice to know these. Now if I wanted other ones, so if I had a more complex project where, say, I had to deal with the loading state, so I was loading in images or loading in sounds and fonts and other things, I could build in a loading state. Then I could have a start state, I could have a play state, I could have a level up state, I could have a replay. I mean, so I can build as many states as I feel I need when I work on my project. Now, if I were to run this right now, nothing has changed because I'm not integrating game state into my project yet. All I've done is create this game state variable. So now we need to figure out how to integrate it into the project. And what we're going to do is start looking at the code that is contained inside our draw function here. I'm going to then be breaking that into separate functions so that I'm able just to call it, because not all of this code is really tied to playing the game. Because I have code right here which says, hey, if my score maxes out, it now shows me this text, you're awesome. Okay, but if it's doing that, then that's really kind of an end state. So we'll be wanting to move that, and we'll take a look at how we will go about this as this process progresses. So it's going to be an incremental thing that we're going to work with. All right. So what's going to happen next is I will now define out, I'll say if GameState is equal to, and when I'm comparing, again, I use two equal signs, not a single equal sign. Single equal signs, I'm setting a value. Two equal signs means I'm comparing. So if GameState is equal to start, at that point, then I want something to happen, and that would be, we'll figure out what goes in there in a moment. Then I can say else if game, and this is where I could do some serious copy pasting, but I'll just type it out. Let my fingers get warmed up. Else if GameState is equal to end Now, you may have noticed that I did not end on a else, but I have an if, else if, else if. I did not end because I could have just as easily, and it would be valid to say else right here, but I chose to use an else if so that if I wanted to have additional game states, I could easily integrate those in, and not ending your if, else if with an else doesn't break it, it doesn't violate it, it's okay. It's nice to end with an else, but you don't have to. The else ends up being your default state. So if there was any possible way that my project would not have game state equal to one of these three values, then I would want an else that does something. Perhaps it would, I don't know what, I could print line something went wrong. So effectively I'm just sending out an error message of, so do I need that? Good practice, I should have something, because if by some reason game state somehow manages to fail or not be set to one of these three values, it would be nice to have that. So I'll actually say something went wrong with game state. I'll put it in, but you don't need to do that. All right, so currently if I were to again run my project, no change, it's going to behave the same because we haven't integrated things into it yet. Now, most of this code right here that I have, that's my game. So what I can do with that is I'm going to cut that. Oh my gosh, my whole game went away. Ah, freak out. It's all good though. Oh no, I don't want to put it here. We're going to do it differently. I'm going to undo that real quick. We'll leave that here for now. What I want to have happen inside start is I want to call my start game function. Inside play, I want to call my play game function. And inside end, I'm going to call my end game function. Now, you probably figured out I was going to say end game at that point, but your brain should be racking themselves going, wait, we don't have a start game, play game, or end game function yet because we haven't made them. So, no time like the present. I'll make three functions really quick. And I'll make these three functions nice and clean. We don't need to figure out all the details that go into each function yet. First, we're just going to make the shells, and then we start populating it. So I'm going down below my draw function here. So here's my draw function. So start game, play game, end game. So I need to define those three functions. And these functions will not return anything, so they will have a data type of void. Start game. And in the interest of time, start game, play game, end game. So that's now I've revealed my end game to you. So I've defined my three functions. And now this is where I want to take all of the stuff that's inside that was inside draw, that is my game, which is clear the background, run the timer, update the catcher, update the drops, check for intersections, blah, 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 check on the score, la-di-da-di. So I'm going to now get that out of there, and I will move that over into play game.
What did you do?
So I have now taken the content that was previously at the beginning under draw and populated play game with that content. So now that play game is populated, we need to think about what should be in start game, but also think about how we would ever get to end game. I'm going to deal with end game, then we'll go back and figure out the start game so we can run it, and the whole thing will run perfectly. It'll be beautiful, and the sun will come out, the snow will disappear, and the world will be happy. It will be good. So end game, really end game is where I want it to display the "you are awesome" kind of text. So I'm just going to move that into end game. So I'm just moving the text that was there that says text "you are awesome" blah blah, and I'm also going to add in, if I'm going to show text on screen, I probably should make sure that I have specified a color option. So I specify that I'm filling it so that we know it's getting a different command. I'm going to fill it with, not with red, but instead I will fill it with blue. I almost did green, but the pure green is just murder on the eyes, so I'll go for the blue, which is a much more pleasant color. So at this point it says end game, but now we can't ever get to end game unless we can somehow change our state. Because if we go back into draw, we look at draw will start at start. My game state is start, because right up here it said game state is start. Therefore, if game state is start, it will call my start game function. Well, assuming we can somehow get from start game into having our game state change to play, then we get to play the game. And now when I'm playing the game, if my score is equal to the so I've caught all of my drops or whatever I want my score to be, I can now just change my game state to something else, and I'll change it to end. So if I accomplish my goal of maxing out the game, or whatever winning condition you set, I can set my game state to end. And now it comes up and says, I'm awesome. But we're still caught with this really annoying thing in start game where we have no way to go from start game into play game because we don't have any means of changing that value. But to prove that all the rest of this works, we're going to kind of cheat momentarily. And what we can do is just, when start game runs, the first time it runs, we'll just say game state is equal to play. So we will just, when start game runs, it will automatically just change the game state. That's not really very satisfying. It doesn't give me that like click to play or any of that other stuff, but we'll add that in just a minute. So start game changes game state to play. Play game runs once I successfully complete my game, it changes my state to end, and then when my game state is end, it's going to run my end game function. So it creates this kind of loop. Now, some of you will find that as you start trying to build these states in and figure out what's going where, that it starts to become this kind of maze of, oh crap, which one points to, and you have to write it out with a little flowchart on a piece of paper. And in more complex systems, that's normal. That you would actually flowchart out the states of your application or your program to keep track of what is going on and where you are at any given point. But now if I run this, cross my fingers, it runs, catch 1, 2, 3, and now we can see it grabbed the blue color, filled it, and I am awesome. So if I want my score to exist, I put a copy of these lines that were here. Now, one thing that I'm noticing is if I'm redoing the same lines of code in two places, that screams put it in a function. If you have a couple lines of code and then you repeat those identical lines of code more than one time, that probably means we want to put that into a function, but we will add more functions to this in a little bit once we get our different game states all working. But I could have a display score function, or I could have it more than just display score. If I had other characteristics, I could have display UI, which would be my score and maybe some messages and whatever else. Put a nice frame around the whole thing so it looks like there's a nice little, so my whole game is contained not just from the edges of the screen, but now I have a nice kind of little frame, rounded corners on it, extra bells and whistles, pretty graphics. So it looks like I'm inside a program, not just something going full screen. So that would be something else we could look at adding to this in a little bit. So right now, my end game paints the background, sets the fill color to red, displays the text, sets the fill color to blue, and then writes the text, "You are awesome," emphasizing on the awe, because we're awed by the greatness of whoever is currently playing the game. So we want them to feel good about themselves. So now the only real big thing left is fixing start game so it doesn't automatically play right away. And to do that, I'm just going to say, give myself a fill. And for this, I'm going to say a fill of 0. So it's filled with black, text, click to play. If I wanted to be generous, I'd say click anywhere to play. But I'm not feeling that generous. And then I need to just specify a position for it. I could say something like 200, 200, and that puts text on screen. And then we need to somehow capture the click of the mouse. And we can do that by accessing the mouse pressed event. So anytime the mouse press occurs, we can be asking, hey, is that going on yet? And if so, we can do something with it. So there is the mouse pressed function that we could access, but in this, we can just very easily just say if mouse pressed is equal to true, and we don't have to put the equal to true, the double equal true. We could just say if mouse pressed, because then that says if mouse pressed is true is how you would read that. And then that is when we want to change our game state. So set the fill to black, put the text on screen. Now I also will be running, my click to play will start turning all chunky, just like the end game text was doing, if I don't also do a background repaint each time. So repaint the background, fill color, put my text on screen, listen for the mouse to be pressed. When it's pressed, change the game state to play. As soon as game state is changed to play, it's going to stop running start game and it will start running play game. And then once I max out my score, it changes the game state to end. And then once the game state is end, it starts running my end game function. If for some reason game state somehow became something not of these three, then it would print out this line of something went wrong with game state into my message window. I currently don't have any way for that to occur, but I could write it into the program to break it if I were feeling malicious. Click to play. Score 1, 2, 3. Now I'm awesome. When our game ends, it's just really not that exciting that it's done. It would be nice to make it so that we can replay it. So what I'm going to do is add in some information of click to play, mouse press, blah, blah, blah. So I'll just copy that, and we'll add that into end game. So in my end game, after it tells me I'm awesome, then what I'm going to do is put in my click to play message. I'll want to change my location so it's not change the Y value. I'll change the X so they both line up. And then we'll have click to play. So my end game keeps the score on screen, tells me how great I am, and then it puts up the click to play message. It listens for the mouse to be pressed. If it is, then game state becomes play. So this is the start of making it so that I can try and replay the game. But we'll find that it probably is not all of what we need. One, two, three. So now I should change it not click to play, but click to play again or try again or something. Some kind of message to that effect. But if I click, I'll notice a couple things are going on. My score isn't resetting. No drops are falling again. And immediately I have now won the game again. But if we think about that, all I did was change my game state to play. But my score, when my game state is play, it checks my player score versus max drops and says, hey, look at that. My score is still 3 because I never reset my score. So it automatically jumps back to the end game again. So I'm caught in now this kind of perpetual loop. I can't play again because I haven't reset the score. So what I could do is do that right now. I'll just set the score back to 0. Score equals 0. Oh, it's player score. Whoops, my bad. Player score is equal to 0. So we're resetting the player score. Click to play. Catch 1, catch 2, catch 3. I'm awesome. Click to play again. Score is 0. And now my drops aren't doing diddly. That's no fun. So we have to figure out what's wrong. So we'll try and reset the timer. Let's see what that does. So reset the score, and then we'll tell the timer start. Let's verify that, yeah, timer start. So we're doing that. Okay, try that. Play. Catch 1, 2, 3. Click to play again. But if we look at what's going on, okay, says if active drops is less than my maximum number of drops. So if we remember that the game started out, active drops was 0. Every time the timer fired off, active drops went up by 1, 2, then 3. So now active drops is at, or actually at 2. So now it's 3. Active drops is 3. So it can't go anymore because when active drops is less than maximum drops, active drops started at 0, max drops started at 3. So when active drops is 0, active drops then becomes 1, timer resets. 1 is less than 3, active drops becomes 2, timer resets. When active drops is 2, 2 is less than 3, active drops becomes 3. Timer runs again. And now active drops is 3. 3 is no longer less than 3. 3 is equal to 3. So it doesn't make active drops get any bigger. We're cycling through, showing our objects based on active drops. So if I don't reset active drops ends the game at 3. So my timer can't ever run again, even if I try and force it. Hey, timer, run. It'll run, and then it'll go, oh, well, we won't run anymore. So might need to reset active drops as well. So we'll reset active drops to 0. I want to do that before the timer, just because I do. Looks prettier that way. So if I do this, I'm going to temporarily modify something in here just so we can see where the drops are. So currently the drops, when they're caught, they go to minus 1,000. So that's not, I'm just going to send the drops to my height. So that drops them to the bottom of the screen. So when they cross the bottom of the screen, it just parks them at height, they're done. But that way we can see them after they've been caught, so we know where those drops happen to exist. So if I catch it, it puts it at the bottom, bottom, bottom. Oh, then they disappeared because our background repainted to make because we made our text pretty, we lost our drops. Okay. And now let me click to play again. And as active drops speeds up, we notice they're at the bottom of the screen. And they're not moving. So they come back now, but they're not moving. But if we notice, once they were caught, their speed got killed. So we need to give them speed again. We need to make their speed actually have a value once more. And we could even reposition them to a new location if we wanted to, so they don't always fall on the same X location. So for doing this, it would probably make sense to add a method to our drop where we specify a reset to them, where we would have something along the lines of void reset, and then y is equal to, I'm going to reset them so they show up on screen just so we can see them temporarily. But then we will want to make that a much, some off-screen number. And then I'll set their x equal to a new location. So that now resets it, and y speed. And we'll reset their y speed. Ooh. Now what we could do is, instead of having it at a fixed amount, this y speed could be based on a value, say a level value, and then we just keep adding to that. So every time we play this, they fall faster and faster and faster and faster, and that would be kind of fun. Yeah. But first we get it working, then we add in bells and whistles. If we try and add in bells and whistles before it's ever running, it will break. Promise you that. So I've made a reset for my drops. A reset function. So now I need to reset them. So to do that, we need to loop through. We need to loop through our drop array. And then tell each drop to reset itself. So we loop through the drop array, calling upon each drop to use its reset method. Then we can start the timer over, change your game state. At that point, it might actually work. So now that it works, I'm going to tweak the values a little bit. I don't need them to stay on the bottom when I catch them. Certainly could. Now some student projects, you want them to stay on screen, so you could certainly do something like that. Some people have decided they want to do that. The 20 and the reset, we're not seeing them yet, so I am going to just dump them off screen at a negative value, same as their initial starting value. So they dump off screen, but they do take on a new position. When I catch them, I'm going to go back to the negative 1,000, so they're long gone off screen. But what would be nice here, so using a level will be an integer because I'm not going to have fractional levels, so it'll be an int level. Level is going to start out at you can just start it at 1. Now the real trick is, do we want to have our speed increase in a linear manner or kind of a nearly exponential? So we start multiplying by level, adding level, but right now we're going to just add that level in and then change the level each time we play the game. So we can start out, though we may, because we're on a computer, computers count from 0, we might want to start level at 0, but we'll try and make it work with 1 and see. So after the player's score is equal to the maximum number of drops, we're going to change our game state to end. Well, at that point, that's really when we have now advanced to our next level. So we could increase our level here, or we can do it in this hole. Once I press the mouse and I'm starting to reset everything, we can increase the level. You could make an argument for both places as being a good place to do it. I'm going to do it inside my endgame function as part of my reset level plus plus. So that essentially is level is equal to level plus 1. So level plus plus. So every time I click to play again, my level is going to go up by 1. Now, what we can do when we look at the drops when they're resetting, we're going to say y speed is equal to, and to make this more dramatic, I'm going to increase it a little bit faster, is equal to y speed plus, so they're originally they were at 3, now it'll be 3 plus level times, let's say level times 3, so it's pretty brutal. So that means the first round, my Y speed is 3 when the objects drop in. The next round, it's 3 plus level times 3. Well, now level is 2 when I reset them, so 2 times 3 is 6. So their speed will be 9. Then when my the next time through, level will be 3, so that's 9 plus 3, it's 12. So it's going to just kind of keep going up. Then it'll be 4 times 3, it's just 12. So it's going to just keep going up and up and up, and I can figure out, you know, any kind of math way of increasing this to make it just increasingly more brutal as you play the game. So I play 1, 2, 3, click to play again. Whoa, crap. All right, maybe that was a little fast. And now let's see. Yeah. Okay, so that speed increase was probably a little too much. Okay, a lot too much. So
I was going up like 5.25.
and we can, if we just add the level in each time, it makes it a much more gentle, and eventually it moves into that hellacious speed. But in the beginning, so now they'll fall a little bit faster. Yeah, that seems to be a more, but it's nice to have that dramatic increase. If you make it a small increase, then the player doesn't realize until kind of they've been sucked in that it's now going really, really fast. But again, figuring out how to build in that change or that difference is part of what it is to build an interesting, unique, and engaging gameplay. So now we have levels, we have reset built into it, and we have a start screen, we have a gameplay, an end screen. Now all of these individual screens you could fill with extra graphics. You don't have to just leave it a blank screen, but you could draw all kinds of extra, circles and rectangles and make all kinds of cool pictures and images, put lots of extra text. You could put complex instructions, all kinds of neat things there for the user, so that when the player is engaged with your project, they have all kinds of nice eye candy to see at each one of the different stages in your game.